let's look at today's topic, which is going to be some past paper practice. And what I really wanted to focus on today was, oh, just have to close this here, and I'm just going to move the thing here. I wanted to focus on directed writing. We've looked at this already a little bit, but sometimes it's nicer to get an idea of what examiners want from you when you have to do that directed writing task on the paper one passages. So I've chosen an example here, October-November 2016 exam, and then I've chosen question 2. We did look at question 1 last week already, question 2, and I want to focus on B. Because although you might have an idea of what directed writing is, it's nice sometimes to see how the examiner will judge your directed writing. So the following passage is an entry from the online weekly blog called Life as a Junior Doctor by Nick Knight. So what is it? It's an entry from an online weekly blog. So obviously the people on here must post every week. And it's a blog that we're looking at. It's going to be in a certain format. It'll have a certain register, probably informal because it's a blog. Life as a Junior Doctor. So we know who's going to be writing. Anybody who's a junior doctor. And this junior doctor happens to be called Nick Knight. So as normal, you'd have your question A, comment on the language and style of the extract from the blog. And why they put this commentary first is because it should make you more aware of the kinds of language that are being used in the extract. By doing that commentary, by analyzing things and breaking them down, you will get a better feel for how this writer writes. And in essence, that is your preparation for what you're going to be doing in the directed writing task in B. So let's see what it's all about. After a week back at work, the writer produces another entry for his blog. So he's already written this blog, and then 1 week later, you're going to write the next blog. Write the opening of this entry, so it's just the opening of his blog, okay? Between 120 to 150 words. Don't exceed by more than 10 words, please. Base your answer closely on the language and style of the original. So we're looking at language and style, not his exact words, just the way that he words things, okay? Because obviously if you're going to go into a blog post, and this is the first blog, you wouldn't expect the same exact phrases to be used the next time he writes. People don't do that in general, although they do have their key phrases, it's true. But let's have a closer look at this article as a whole first. It's got the title, The Penny Dropping. Do you know what it means when the penny drops? You ever encountered that before? If not, then I'm going to tell you because we're always restricted for time. So the penny dropping is when you understand something finally. Ah, that's what it means, understanding, okay? So keep in mind this idea of understanding something, understanding becoming clearer. And so he's given his blog a title. So if you're going to write your blog, give it a title. Posted on, and then the date is given, and you would mimic that, okay? You would post it a week later on July the 25th, okay, 2014. And then how does he start? Hello all, all right? So you want to mirror the kinds of things he does, but you don't want to use the exact words. So maybe you could say, hello everyone, for example. Let's rather read through this before I go into little details like that, and then we'll look at the examiner's response. Hello all. Now, I may have neglected to mention in my last blog entry that I am indeed on a lovely week off. Rather than opt to jet off to some sunnier climate with the rest of the country, or find myself in some far-flung corner of the world, I think I might be a little old to be finding myself at 31 perhaps. If I do, I may need a GPS. I decided to go back to my family home. Okay, so he's a bit humorous in the way that he makes his revelations, all right? So he's 31. He's gonna, for his holiday, he's going back to his family home. And it's time for reflection. You know, this idea of finding oneself. It's all about reflecting. Who am I? What is my purpose? This kind of thing. For many people, but very sadly, I appreciate not all, in brackets, the family home is a place to reconnect, recuperate, and reflect on their life's journey and take stock of what's important. I am definitely at my most relaxed at home, I suppose in a way, safe from the pressures that I place upon myself as society backs up with a whacking great punch of expectation. A nice metaphor there. I become Nick, the 31-year-old doctor, regressing back to 12-year-old Nick in my old bedroom with all the dreams and aspirations that I had back then etched on the walls and photographs. And it makes me smile. Note this word, this sentence on its own outside of paragraphs. Okay, so ultimately saying that this kind of thing makes him very happy. And here's some repetition here, and it makes me smile. It makes me smile because I realize that despite being a little older, okay, fine, a little more grizzled and life-hardened with the highs and the lows that have presented themselves, I still have those deep-rooted dreams and aspirations. I still have belief. Here's another sentence all on its own. I feel incredibly lucky to have these. I may lose them through life. So I think what he's doing there when he puts things into some single sentences like this, he's trying to highlight an important point. He comes to a conclusion of some kind based on what he's just written. Okay. Which brings me on to the main point of today's blog. As I sit here with a steaming cup of mum's tea, having just done an hour of tedious but necessary revision questions for an exam in September. Remember, he's a junior doctor, so he's probably still writing exams, that I wanted to share with you. It is, in a way, a mission statement. It's a statement about the mission you're going to have in life, okay? I woke up this morning, as I always do back home, having had a wonderful night of sleep. I awoke calmly, body still paralyzed from sleep, but as I opened my eyes and my brain started to get the first dusty cerebral cog turning for the day, in other words, a cerebral cog. A cog is a piece of machinery that makes things turn. Okay, so in other words, his brain is starting to work. In that moment, I just knew what kind of doctor, and more globally, health professional I want to be, am meant to be, am positioned to be. Note this use of 3, highlighting his reflective mindset right now, that I want to be, that I'm meant to be, and that I am actually in a position to be. I'm positioned to be this professional. It just occurred to me that this is what I could do. One thing I forgot to mention to you, sorry, see that little reference there, number 2? That means there's a glossary at the bottom that will explain to you what's going on there. Okay, so cerebral cog turning, start the brain thinking. A GPS is a global positioning system, just in case you didn't know. And later on, we'll come across the word cognitively, which means in their minds or mentally. All right, so it's always nice to have a glossary at the bottom, and that's what those little numbers mean. And once again, and it is a great feeling, this idea that he knows who he wants to be, who he's meant to be, and that he's positioned to be. And it is a great feeling. So note his style. He's very conversational. He's very, he reveals things quite easily. He's a bit humorous. He takes an idea and he explores it, and then he comes to some sort of revelation about it. And he does this quite often in the text. So let's look at the I want to be part, this part, first. Quite simply, I want to promote, help, and support people to be as active, fit, and perform to the best of their abilities that they wish to, both cognitively, mentally, and physically. From the 45-year-old running their first marathon to the 65-year-old hoping to regain some more independence after an operation, to the 23-year-old fitness addict. Anyone, right? So that's him addressing that point. Now, what about the am meant to be part? Okay, so who's he meant to be? All by fate and not design. And let me just check something. I just want to double check something. Here he's got capitals on all. Does he do that? Has he done that yet before? I just want to have a quick look. No, he hasn't done it before, but there he does it. Okay, so it adds emphasis to what he's saying. I just want to look. He does it from time to time. Look, if you look at the rest of the text, you can see some capitalization going on for emphasis. All right. So if you're going to mimic that, that's the way you're going to do it. all by fate and not design, I should start by saying. In the past 12 years, I have tripped my way. So this just happened to him. I tripped my way across a degree in exercise and sports sciences, a PhD in performance nutrition, worked in healthcare consultancy, gained a medical degree, and helped numerous teams and individuals maximize their physical and mental performance to achieve whatever the goal. Whether it be the 4 guys, he's sounding very conversational here, 4 guys and dear friends who rowed across the Indian Ocean, or my relative that wanted to lose weight, be more active. Now, I am also getting the opportunities to do some media work, and we will have to wait a couple of months to see how the Discovery TV show is received. And this yet provides me with another platform to share what I love, our body, and all the highs and lows of performance that come with it. So he's had this revelation of what he's meant to do. And that links to that idea of that title, the penny dropping and understanding. Okay. And finally, the am positioned to be part. I am very lucky to be a doctor, as it means in time, I will get the opportunity to specialize in my passion, sports and exercise medicine, a means to understand to the nth degree, the final degree, the nth degree about how to optimize health, fitness, and performance for anyone. Emphasis again, also showing that passion and excitement. Now, despite misconceptions, this does not just mean for the elite athlete. In fact, it is more about you or I, unless, of course, you are an elite athlete. The average person who wants to get fitter or healthier so they can play with their grandchildren for longer or walk the dog for an extra 30 minutes. What else do you notice about the writing? I'm just going to stop here so we can concentrate on the text. Look how he breaks down what he was thinking before into 3 different sections. He puts them into quotes. He talks in sentences, and then he always likes to butt in on his own thoughts to give you extra information. He uses the dashes here. He does it quite a lot. Look at that. Okay, so you'd have to do something like that. And he loves to put those aside, like where he's talking to you. Okay, he loves to use those brackets to do that. He does it a lot. So between some capitalization from time to time, quoting himself like here to refer back to an idea, the use of dashes, the use of brackets, capitalization, etc. This is the kind of thing that you'd have to try and mimic so that it would sound like this person is continuing to write what they're writing when you write your directed writing piece. Also, this idea of sentences standing out by themselves. Performance of the body and mind is my distilled, summarized passion. Something that is distilled is very strong. Okay. I like to call it performance for living. Okay, so this is what drives him, this idea, performance for living. And look, he's used ellipsis again to show a train of thought of some kind. He did it here as well. Why there are 4 dots here instead of 3 dots, because an ellipsis is always 3 dots, is because that final dot shows that he's come to the end of the sentence. All right, so 4 dots means an end of sentence. 3 dots is a continued sentence, a continued train of thought. I'm going to follow it now fully, with excitement, drive, and the self-belief. Notice this list of 3 to emphasize just how deeply he believes in this. I'm going to follow it now fully, with excitement, drive, and the self-belief that I still have since I was 12 years old. Have a great week, everyone. Dr. Nick. So that's how he refers to himself. So you're going to try to open your blog in a certain way, not necessarily using hello all, but hi everyone. Make sure that you have a title that reflects what it is that you're going to be discussing. And because he's already opened up this idea of he wants to get back and get motivated into this particular section of medicine, particular branch of medicine, should I say, maybe you can continue that, okay? So I just want to read the question again so that we know what the focus is. Well, how are we doing for time? Okay. The following passage is an entry from the online weekly blog called Life as a Junior Doctor by Nick Knight. After a week back at work, the writer produces another entry for his blog. Write the opening of this entry with this length of words. Base your answer closely on the language and style of the original. So that's what we've been looking at. We've been looking at how this particular person expresses himself. And then you're going to put yourself in their shoes and you're going to write as Dr. Nick. The way he writes, the way he thinks, his humor, his ideas, his passions, his interests, all of it is in here. And that's what you have to do. And it's in a short space of time. 120 to 150 words is not much. About half a page, just over half a page. So depending on the size of your handwriting. So it's not much, but you have to make it convincing. Right. So I wanted to look at the examiner's reports because a lot of past papers will also come with examiner's reports. And that's where they comment on the kinds of things students have done in the exam and what they were meant to do. So this particular examiner's report says they give a key message. So an overall message about how students performed or how they're supposed to perform. Learners who write precisely and economically, maintaining a close focus upon style and tone, are those who tend to achieve the best results. They also need to be able to adapt their own writing style to incorporate diverse directed tasks. For example, letters, articles, diaries, and demonstrate secure familiarity with their conventions and style. So we just looked at a blog. What are the conventions of a blog? Well, it's quite casual, but there's always a date, there's a hello, there's a sign off, there's a revelation of feelings. Okay, this is the feelings or thoughts or experiences or opinions. Okay, that's the conventions and style of a blog. A secure degree of technical accuracy, especially in the use of spellings, punctuation, and tenses, is required at this level. So although it's a blog and it's conversational, that does not mean that you shouldn't use punctuation correctly, that you shouldn't write in full sentences, that you shouldn't use punctuation to create an effect. That still has to be there. And if you start to write in the past tense, I was at home last week when I realized that I hadn't given enough thought to my studies, for example. It was at that point that I decided X, Y, Z. Then you stick in that paragraph, you stick to the past tense. And then if you want to come into the present, but now I realize what I actually want to do is, and I believe that, and I can't, you stick in that present tense. You might start out in the past and you might move into the present tense, but whatever it is, be consistent. All right, don't just jump from past to present to past to present. It has to make sense. Okay? And generally when something is reflective, it will look back on past events, but it will also then focus on the effect now. And there might also be some hint of what is to come in the future or what is desired for the future. So keep that in mind if you're looking at blogs or reflective writing in general. By the way, what I want to say here about that first point, I never really explored it fully. Learners who write precisely and economically, in other words, do not be verbose. If you can say something directly, say it. Don't word things, don't make things too wordy so that it sounds impressive, because it doesn't. Say things directly and clearly. Maintaining a close focus upon style and tone. Style, the way that he writes. The tone, humorous tone, revelatory tone, all of that must come into it. Yeah, and those are the people that achieve the best results in the directed writing section. Now, here are some general comments about what students did. Let's see if we've got enough time. Okay. General comments. Although there were relatively few unfinished papers, so most students actually finished, there is still some evidence of uneven time allocation to individual sections, so watch out for that midterm. This underlines the importance of addressing language features without preamble, without too much stalling or too much build-up. Devoting the first paragraph of the answer to summarizing the contents of the passage is not helpful and waste time. And this is focusing on question 1A when you do your commentary. Okay. But now we move on to B, the relevant section we're looking at now. There was some fluent and perceptive writing in response to the directed writing tasks and a general observance of the stipulated word boundaries. So that is obviously important to them, that students have obeyed the word boundaries. In each of the three questions, remember we're looking at question 2 of this paper, in each of the 3 questions, candidates were asked to base their answer on the style and language of the original. This does not imply that they should replicate what happens in the original passage. Sometimes, particularly in the case of the first passage, the responses were modeled too closely on the events the storyline, the events in the original, and so doing restricted the effectiveness of the answer. Similarly, candidates should bear in mind that though they have been asked to base their writing on the style and language of the original passage, they should always use their own words. And that's what I was trying to tell you when you change slight ideas to, don't say hi all, no, hello everyone. Change it up a bit. That's what people would do when they're writing blogs. Okay? So use your own words, but try to sound like that person. Now, for question 2b, the one we've been looking at, the most conspicuous features of the passage were generally well represented in the responses. And those conspicuous features are those ones I've pointed out to you, those things that stand out, the odd capitalization, the odd lone sentence between longer paragraphs, dashes, brackets. So those were conspicuous, they're obvious, okay? They stand out. Right? Were generally well represented in the responses, though the distinctive style and tone was not so easily reproduced. So maybe they didn't capture the humor as well. Maybe the casual, conversational, or revelatory style was not captured as well. Most candidates tried to emulate, to mimic, the clumsiness and sense of disclosure. Okay, why are they saying it's clumsy? Well, because he jumps from saying something and then he'll insert some other thought that comes in. Okay, as he's typing his main thought, there's another thought that comes in that he has to tell you about in brackets. They're a bit clumsy. We want to focus on that idea that you're building up, and then you go off on a tangent. Okay, so that's where the clumsiness comes in. And sense of disclosure, that revealing, to be able to reveal something. So let's just read the sentence again. Most candidates tried to emulate the clumsiness and sense of disclosure found in the original. Reveal something, okay. And many used features such as the short, loaded sentences, which they had not remarked on in the commentary, which is strange because you'll notice that sometimes when students do directed writing, they'll do things sort of subconsciously without realizing that they haven't even looked at those aspects of the writing in their commentary. So that is quite a common thing to happen. So that, in other words, when you do your commentary, be thorough, okay? So there was also some very effective use of capitalization, which cleverly echoed the original. For example, I am now happily off to work. And then in brackets, well, not happily back to work, but is there any other option? Close brackets. It does sound like a writer, something the writer would say, doesn't it? And look how that emphasis on happily is used cleverly by the student there. Some of the better responses came mischievously close to parodying the occasionally schmaltzy tone of Dr. Nick. So they were very aware of the humor that was going on in the passage. But also, they wanted to make fun of him a little bit. And when you parody something, you make fun of it. You use exaggeration. Okay, it's the use of exaggeration to make fun of something, to mock somebody, to make fun of something or somebody. And occasionally schmaltzy tone. A schmaltzy tone is like sugary or overly sweet or overly emotional, okay? So Disney can be schmaltzy, they lived happily ever after, it's all schmaltzy ideas. So the schmaltzy tone of Dr. Nick, and where is the schmaltzy tone coming through? See noticeable differences for the positive. In my always awesome patience is so warming, okay? Or something else they've written, don't let your dreams be dreams. Anything is possible with the right mentality. All you need is to be willing. I should put that in a fortune cookie, okay? So they're trying to just emulate the word. He's so positive and so, not naive, but he's almost a bit over the top about what he wants to do. But that's what people do when they get passionate about things. Some of the weaker responses struggle to find fresh invention to write about the next week and to see what would be explored in that week. And these tended to rehash the original material with only marginal alterations. So in other words, they just wrote about what he had thought about when he was on holiday, not necessarily what he's doing with at work. Even though that doesn't mean to say you couldn't bring that in briefly, last week's reflections on XYZ have changed so drastically today because all my patients are complaining about the horrible diet that I'm putting them on, for example. So this is the kind of thing, it really is a work of art. You're trying to reflect that tone, you're trying to reflect the style, but you want to use fresh ideas, and you want to make sure that you sound like that person who's writing. Now, if I go on quickly down to some advice given from a website on directed writing, and this is the link to that website, although it won't work if you ask for this copy of the lesson, which you're welcome to. The link won't work, you have to type it in. It says, in directed writing, you are required to either continue the original passage or write another piece that is similar to it, okay? And what I wanted to look at is the 3 points of advice. Look at some of the literary techniques used in the passage and choose a few that you want to include in your writing. You don't have to use them all. Make a plan. We always have to have a plan of what you're going to write. Get writing, because that's the most important thing, especially when you're under a time limit. Make sure that you use the language, not the exact words, but ones with a similar feel and style of the passage, okay? So that's the whole point. It has to be your own words. It must seem like it's coming from that person. Do not lift directly from the text. In other words, do not have a sentence exactly in the same wording from the text in your directed writing. Do not. Use proper and consistent tense. I've spoken about the tenses. You can start with past, you can come with the future, or you can come to the past and come to the present, or you can start out in the present, but then keep in the present. Or just be consistent in where you're placing your thoughts. Okay, if your thoughts are about now in the present, keep them there. Okay. Then read it to yourself, especially if you're asked to continue the passage. Reading your work as a continuation of the original text will help you determine whether your writing style and language mimic those of the author, and then you're done. Okay, so it takes quite a few things it's a juggling act, in other words. But luckily, this piece of this task is not too long in what in terms of length of what you have to produce, but it still requires planning.